Hello and welcome to another episode of the Kipper stream. Today we have UKIP's very own head of communications, that is Mr. Kris Hicks. How you doing, Kris Hicks?
Hi there, very well, thank you. Good evening.
Good stuff. I'm obviously quite a veteran in UKIP and know everything about all the roles in UKIP. But for anyone who's, slightly ignorant of certain aspects, can you explain what exactly head of communications does and what the job entails?
Well, certainly. I mean, in the context of UKIP, at present, the head of communications entails the first press officer, effectively, of the party. So the first point of contact with journalists who inquire on a national level, and indeed, actually, really on a regional level as well. Obviously, we don't have the luxury of teams and teams of press officers and communications officers that other political parties have. But effectively, my remit would be focused on obviously press relationships with newspapers, television channels, radio, taking bookings for television and radio appearances, representing the party leader in that context as well, whenever there are requests, and also, of course, producing press releases and gaining coverage for the party. And then the other side of it then is overseeing the social media aspect, Twitter, Facebook, and anything else really that comes under the rubric of communications in a modern concept of a political party or any other type of organization.
And what sort of power do you have? Because I imagine if you have do you have sole control over the Twitter, the Facebook? What power do you have to add and remove things? And how do other people influence that?
Well, I don't have, absolute power. I mean, at the end of the day, one would report to the party leader. Of course, it's in a bit of a different situation right now. We have an interim leadership, but I mean, normally in my role, I'd report directly to the party leader. Obviously, the party chairman would have a hand in that. And then, of course, we have other individuals who have been kind of vetted who can have access to that stuff because, of course, running a comms for an entire national political party is a bit too much for just one person. So obviously delegation is very good. And we've had some great volunteers actually who've come through the past 12 months, done a sterling job, really committed to the party. Again, like I said, we don't have the luxury of teams and teams of people who can do this role, for a salary. So we're very grateful. And I think in many ways, over the past year, considering where we are and where we've been financially, we've actually punched well above our weight on a number of communications fronts, and of course I think we've been very successful so far with our YouTube channel, which has got more subscribers than any other YouTube channel for any other political party in the United Kingdom.
So being the front line against the media, you must have a pretty close relationship with each UKIP leader. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, well, when you represent the party in this manner, officially when I signed up for the role, it was the press officer to the party leader. But at the same time, the party didn't really officially have a director of communications at that point. So it just fell on me that I would effectively take up that position as well. Obviously, we had a consultant on board at that point, but that consultant then left us after the party conference last September. So it effectively fell on me to become, head of press and communications alongside the party leader's press officer. But yeah, it means a very close relationship with that person. You effectively become the right-hand man of that person. And it's critical that you have that relationship so you can understand where each other is going. You can always advise that person. They don't always necessarily take your advice on everything, but it's important that you build a level of trust and that you're both on the same page, which, as I said, requires a very close relationship in that context. Yeah.
And you mentioned YouTube a moment ago, and you also have control over the Twitter and Facebook and things like that. As of recent, we've been doing a lot more content on YouTube. How do you see YouTube as sort of an effective tool with the recent things which you've got going on with the demonetization and the restrictions? Do you still think it's as an effective tool as it was, say, 12 months ago?
I think it's still effective for something in the context of a political party. I mean, I see people being demonetized. I mean, it would be an extra step for YouTube to demonetize or indeed remove a legitimate political party from the platform. I suspect that would be something that they would be hesitant to do. Obviously, they've gone after many people. Obviously, they've gone after Carl Benjamin. We've had this obviously Black Pigeon, although he's now returned, and many others, commentators, and that is a deep concern. But I mean, from the purely political side of things, no, I don't think they will go that far just yet. But it means that
it's interesting you say that, because I think it came out today or a few days ago that they've gotten rid of the Spanish party Vox. Now, I don't know a lot about their politics. I hear they're quite extreme on certain things, but they've completely gotten rid of their channel, so I'm told. So who knows? We might be edging towards that.
You never know. Then we're in a very dark place, aren't we? And if this kind of stuff continues, I would look at platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, quite frankly, to constitute commons. These are run by private companies, but they're so now ubiquitous. They're practically everywhere, and it's so vital that individuals have access to them. I think it might be time for governments to actually view them as commons. But the other problem is, of course, is that a lot of these complaints come from governments themselves. And the social media organizations, of course, cave in because they want to trade in those countries that those governments operate in, don't they? So, but of course, there are alternatives. Although I'm very skeptical at the moment. Obviously, there's things like BitChute and other things like that, Gab. Although my skepticism really is that we may be driven into a kind of a digital ghetto, whereby the echo chamber becomes even smaller, really, and we only start talking to other people who agree with us, which is not what we want whatsoever. But I mean, in the meantime, look, we won't think about that. We'll just focus on building up our presence. That's all we can do, isn't it, really? And keep fighting on the platforms that we have so far. So, being at the front line against the media, you must have come into some pretty interesting situations in some green rooms. Would you care? Yes. Yeah. Would you care to share any particularly interesting stories when it might have got a little heated or awkward?
Feel free to change the names.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I would put it like this. I mean, they're not particularly interesting stories. They're just extraordinary by how boring and awkward they are. I mean, practically every political green room you go into, whether it's the BBC, ITV, etc., obviously is filled with campaigners and politicians from other parties, most of whom think that you're some kind of mad knuckle-dragging Nazi or some such, and they believe everything that's been put on the media. So that always leads to awkward situations. I mean, sometimes somebody puts up some a little conversation about the weather or how difficult their journey to the venue was.
Who's the oddest person you've had a conversation about the weather with? The Green Party.
No, I remember there's always a staffer or two in there. And they tend to be a little bit strange. There was a Lib Dem staffer at one event, and so sometimes you wonder whether or not you're talking to a human being. But I'll just leave it there.
And when you're in that green room, do you actually, do you want to have a conversation, or is it sort of you want to just focus on your thing? Are you actively looking? Because I imagine what the staff is thinking of is, I see these massive political figures and I sort of want to say something light so that it's not completely awkward, but I don't want to talk too much. So would you rather them just to reach out and say, what's your view on the state of feminism in the 21st century? Or would you rather they just sort of keep their mouth shut?
I think the latter, not because I disrespect their view, but the suspicion is always that all these green rooms are actually mic'd up by the broadcasters. So I mean, everyone's a bit wary of that. I remember during the election, I did a program, BBC Wales. We did a Sunday supplement kind of event. Where there was a big panel of all the candidates for the European elections. My wife came along with me to the green room, and she made a joke to one of the other candidates saying, "Oh, they brought us all in here so that we start, knocking stuff out of each other." It was a jokey comment, and he said, "Oh no, I don't think that's it. I think it's just because it makes it easy for them to have us all in one place." It's like, it's a joke, okay?
Yeah.
But that's another key difference, I think, between a lot of people in UKIP and the other parties, is that it's not that they're humorless. It's just they're frightened for the life of them to actually make any kind of joke, really, in a public context. And
who can blame them when people are getting arrested for certain jokes?
Well, absolutely, or even deselected by your own party. I mean, obviously UKIP has been very supportive of freedom of speech, certainly for our members and our candidates. But obviously, this is not something that anyone else in any other party in this country, certainly an establishment party, can rely on. I mean, they all get thrown under the bus, don't they?
Absolutely.
Does anybody else want to jump in with some questions? Well, I have one actually. I understand you are Welsh, Kris.
I am Welsh. I was born in Wales. Yes, I do not deny that. I'm not English. Yes.
So whereabouts did you grow up in Wales, and how did that affect you politically?
So I was born in a town called Bridgend, which is equidistant between Cardiff and Swansea in South Wales. Traditionally a Labour supporting area, although it went Tory in '83 during the Thatcher landslide that year. I mean, the background, I mean, most of my grandparents and parents tended to be in the Labour camp, although I know they voted for Thatcher in '83 and '87. And in terms of how it affected me, I mean, I could see the way. I mean, I'm a child of Blair, so to speak, right? So I'm 31, so I was 10 when Tony Blair was elected. And when you're in Wales, you're very conscious of the absolute mafia-like control of the Labour Party over every single local and national institution in the country, certainly in South Wales and the valleys. And as you get older, you start to recognise, well, you know, why are we so poor in regards to the rest of the country? You know, why aren't there many jobs? Why are we always under threat? And why is it always that the Labour Party are winning elections here? And you know, if they're so great, then why isn't anything improving? So I mean, there was always that. My grandfather was a big influence on me. He was always a kind of a big Eurosceptic, and some of the first stories and my knowledge in politics was his absolute loathing for Neil Kinnock. And the view that he had kind of sold himself out to the EU gravy train. You know, he was a guy who came, you know, genuine working class chap who kind of rose in the Labour Party, became an MP, became leader of the Labour Party, was sceptical of the European Union, and then suddenly, you know, becomes its biggest fan, and then you know, a governor and part of the commission, and then his wife became a commissioner as well. So, you know, it was that kind of hypocrisy which really made me aware of, you know, how Labour operates in Wales. And then I realised that, you know, all of the policies that they advocated, whether they were economic or social, simply didn't work. So obviously then I started looking at kind of more right of centre ideas. And I mean, I've been aware of UKIP probably since the early noughties. I didn't join until about 2011, although I had considered before that. But you know, I remember the Roger Knappman days and things like that, and I thought, well, you know, they're right on. And you had the idea that that the party was a genuine libertarian party at that time, even. And for me as well, opposition to the European Union, or indeed any structure which seeks to subsume a nation state, for me, it didn't take much thought to be opposed to it. It almost just seems, you know, it's a feeling. Surely it's obvious, you know. Clearly it's not obvious for a lot of people, but when you have independence and autonomy subsumed by a larger organization and a larger state, that opens it up to corruption and eventually to tyranny and oppression. And I understood that, thankfully, from a very young age, and so that's where I came from, really.
Now, a lot of people say that UKIP has really great potential in the north of England because we've done very well there a lot of the time. But what I very rarely hear is that we have great potential in Wales. But at the last Assembly election, we did, what was it, 3rd or 4th place? We got 8 seats, which is very good.
7 seats. Sorry, Dave.
7 seats, which is very good for a small party. So what do you see our prospects like in Wales, and how are we going to basically tap into what we did the last time round? How are we going to make sure that we get those seats back?
Well, one of the great things for us in Wales, certainly with Welsh Assembly elections, is that we have partial proportional representation. So there are 60 members of the Welsh Assembly, 40 are elected first past the post, but there are 20 on regional list systems. So we got approximately just over 12.5% in Wales at the 2016 Welsh Assembly elections, which led again to the 7 members of the Welsh Assembly with UKIP. So, you know, we've got a chance because we've got PR there. But I think there are a lot of opportunities in Wales. I mean, one of the things we've looked at and that now we've changed back to is a Devo skeptic position, both in Wales and in Scotland, and indeed even in Northern Ireland. So we're actively now calling for a referendum on devolution in 2024. And I suspect that that position now will become one of the core promises of our campaign at the 2021 Welsh Assembly elections. And, you know, UKIP was always a Devo skeptic party up until I think it was approximately 2014, when Nigel Farage gave a press conference in Wales and he was asked the question about devolution. And off the cuff, he just answered, well, the decision's been made, you know, there's been another secondary referendum on laws and therefore UKIP supports devolution. And I understand that was much to the surprise and shock of the people sitting next to him. And ever since, it was the policy of the party not to oppose devolution. But of course, obviously some context, before I became head of comms for UKIP, I was head of comms for UKIP in the Welsh Assembly. And in February 2018, I organised to have a survey made with Opinium, a polling survey with Opinium, which are one of the questions of which asked the question, would you like to kind of abolish the Welsh Assembly, or would you like to extend its powers or maintain the current situation? And that found that approximately 26% of Welsh people would like to either abolish the Welsh Assembly or reduce its powers. If I recall, I think it was about 18% wanted to abolish the Welsh Assembly. So if UKIP kind of takes up that position, or at least presents a kind of a Devo skeptic position, and we can appeal to that percentage of Welsh people who want to either abolish or reduce the powers, then potentially we could get, you know, 15, 16, 17, or even more percentage points in the next election, and potentially get about 10 or 11 AMs, realistically speaking.
And why do you think that is? Because you don't see the same Devo skeptic public attitude in Scotland, for example. They very much like having their own influence and deciding some of their own affairs. Why do you think it's Wales that, for a fifth of the people, don't want to have some sort of home rule, some sort of devolution?
I suspect a lot of it is down to the difference between Welsh nationalism and Scottish nationalism. Welsh nationalism, unlike Scottish nationalism, is grounded on the politics of language. So Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party, was founded around the question of the disappearance of the Welsh language. And there are many in what you would call kind of monoglot areas of Wales, more anglicised areas, kind of areas in Bridgend, where I'm from.
So more southern, you'd say? Yeah,
more South Wales, particularly South Wales Valley, who are very sceptical of kind of the devolution project. And they are unionists. They are very staunch unionists. They believe in Britain. They believe in the relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom. And what they fear is that devolution is kind of a stepping stone to, you know, breaking up the United Kingdom. Whereas, you know, obviously in Scotland, Scottish identity and Scottish nationalism wasn't built on the idea of language. And again, it's interesting what's happened in Scotland, how the SNP has kind of drawn back again and the Tories are back in. So, you know, what we found, I think,
whether it will stay that way or not is another question.
Well, indeed, but I think what we find in Scotland is that, you know, the majority of Scots would like the SNP to represent their interests, but they don't actually agree with the fundamental position that the SDP, the SNP, that is, rather, exists for, which is quite a conundrum for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do we have any questions from the stream? Just because I don't want to completely consume this entire stream myself.
Yeah, that's fine. I have a decent question from the YouTube chat, and it's from an Irish Nirvana. And he says, I personally like the videos you've done with Carl. Would you consider doing more, but with a bigger variety of people? And are there any further developments to hint towards that?
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to do it more. I mean, anyone and everyone really interested in doing videos with us. I mean, just email in, make a suggestion. I mean, obviously, geographically, we're limited to, you know, certain parts of the country. Obviously, I'm based in London. Our team, a lot of the guys who do the filming, are based in Surrey. But I mean, if people want to come down, possibly we can organise, you know, anything from, you know, just members who want to talk about particular issues from their local area to, you know, elected members of the party to party stalwarts. I mean, yeah, I'm happy to do any and all of that. Just email us.
And expand on that, because do you think, I mean, obviously I think most people would say it's an effective tool, but just how effective is it? Because I've seen some of the numbers and we're getting on some of them 100,000 or so views, which is phenomenal. I mean, we don't even have that many members, you know. So it's a incredibly powerful tool. Part of the end of the question that was asked is, what are our plans to develop and to expand on this sort of idea? And if I'm not mistaken, we're outpacing some of the other parties with our online presence. So it seems like we've really tapped into something. What are we doing in terms of development here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's been a number of meetings ongoing in the past few weeks between kind of contributors to the party who've got some fresh ideas on that front, between kind of other staff members as well. I've taken a bit of a back seat since the end of the election, of course. First and foremost, my role is to the party leader. And right now, of course, we have an interim leadership, and the focus is on preparing for the next leader, the next results, of course, with this new election, and then onwards then to September for the party conference. But I mean, I'd like to give you some more firm plans, but of course, what's happened, of course, is that we have an interim leadership right now, so I can't, give you an absolute affirmative answers at this point. But I mean, in terms of what we've been doing, yes, I think we need to get far more video out there, more consistent, with even more voices from across the country, really. And yes, I mean, if you compare our channel to the Tories or Labour, I mean, all their channel has is party election broadcast and a couple of little, politically correct pieces to camera, and they're getting what, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 views on some of these videos. I mean, these are, and for the national, for the Tories, who are the party of government, to have such a poor YouTube channel, I mean, it's just absolutely shocking. But I think a lot of this really is down to the fact that these people, these parties, they're fearful of saying anything which may cause ruptures. They're just too fearful to use the platform properly at the end of the day.
Yeah. Because I was gonna. Oh, I can't hear anything now.
We can hear you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I was gonna say, because I got the statistics up on Social Blade, which is what compares YouTube channels, and it's quite remarkable. I believe it's when you took over and when we started having Carl on the YouTube channel, like just how rapidly we overtook the other YouTube channels in that. Because we were sitting at around about maybe 13,000 subscribers. And the other pies were around 23, a little over 25,000. So they were quite a bit ahead of us. And then within the space of about a month and a half, we'd shot way past them. And we are now well above 40,000. And they're still trickling in somewhere between 25 and 30,000. It's just remarkable just how far we've outpaced them in such a short space of time. And what do you think, attributed to that growth, that rapid growth?
Well, I think
what we did that they weren't doing.
Well, I think first and foremost, I have to give full credit to Carl, because Carl came to me and he said, look, let's have a series of discussions. I think you're the guy to talk to and have it all on camera. And I must admit, I was a little bit skeptical, because I thought, why does anyone really want to watch two blokes just talk about various issues online? But actually, you know what, it's actually really popular. And, Carl was right. And I think what really contributes to it, obviously, Carl's got his own people, his fans, and that draws some people in. But the other side of it, I think it's the fact that we're willing to discuss social issues honestly, in a manner that no other political party will. They won't even dare to talk about the kind of issues that we talk about. And I think we've also proven that you can talk about these issues without being, coarse or, out of order on all these things. I think you can have these kind of respectful conversations that are genuinely interesting, open and honest. And, long may that continue. And that's what people want as well. I mean, it's all about authenticity. And that's what UKIP has to stand for going forward. So, yeah, I think it's really down to that, because none of the other parties, I mean, every other party uses a PR company to put their message forward. No PR company would have such an open discussion of the kind of issues. They wouldn't accept it for a political party. They would not advise that. So, honesty, openness, freedom. That's why it's successful, I think. Anyway.
Yeah.
And we seem to have had join us some of my favourite YouTube personalities. We've had Carl Benjamin, as you pointed out. We've had Paul Joseph Watson, Count Dankula, Milo Yiannopoulos, who's one of my favourites also. Why do you think these big personalities seem to be coming to us and not some of the other parties?
Well, let me tell you, I mean, when they first announced that they were joining the party, I was still at the Welsh Assembly at the time, working with Neil Hamilton. And I thought, I saw this, I thought this is an absolutely brilliant opportunity for the party. I mean, to tell you the truth, I mean, there was a lot of internal discussion and a lot of skepticism. And I mean, you know, the way some of the arguments may have gone, they may not have been allowed in at one point, quite frankly. But I knew these guys from YouTube. I thought, you know, this is an opportunity to reach a new audience. And then I showed this to Neil Hamilton. And I said, oh, Neil, Sargon of Akkad has joined UKIP. And he said, Sargon? An Akkadian emperor has joined UKIP? So I spent much of that day obviously telling him about Carl and the others as well. And, you know, I'm obviously telling him about Count Dankula. Count Dankula? Who's that? You know? And I said, look, what you've got to do now, you've got to make a video welcoming them all to the party. So I wrote a little script for him.
I've seen this video. It's very good.
And it led to one of the highlights of my political comms career so far, kind of handing Neil Hamilton this script. And he's kind of reading it. So he's very quiet. And he's kind of nodding his head and looking at it. And then he looks up and he says, Kris, what is a dank meme? And so I spent that evening obviously teaching Neil about dank memes and internet culture. But yeah, we made that video, and I mean, it was amazing. We had about 400,000 views on Twitter. We had The Guardian, we had The Independent, and various other, you know, lefty papers just going insane over it, you know. And no, it was great. And I think as well, it woke a lot of people up. That, you know, independent of Carl and others, there were people internally in the party who understood where they were coming from in terms of memes and internet culture, and then we could do this and engage with them. You know, it wasn't awkward for us to kind of all slot in. And when I first met Carl and his guys as well, I mean, it was obvious that we were coming really from the same place and we spoke the same language. To answer the initial question, you know, why are they coming to us? Well, you know, if you're going to select a political party of any notability in Britain, quite frankly, I mean, I don't think Labour, the Tories, and Lib Dems would allow them in. What you know, why? You know, because why would they want such people who they would consider to be, you know, effectively loose cannons with, you know, a lot of history of things that they may or may not have said. And of course, they want to talk about issues which no other party will touch. And, you know, that is what UKIP is all about. And that is what UKIP's for. It is UKIP's unique role in British politics to speak up for the kinds of things that nobody else will touch. And that's critical. And we play an important role for British democracy, really, because if we weren't here talking about these things, well, I think we'd be in a worse place than we are right now, quite frankly.
Yeah, and there's I just want to jump to two very brilliant comments just came up on the YouTube chat, and they're both from the same person, Matthew Hatch, and thank you for these. The first one is Carl's best work so far was when he went out and just talked to people. This could be a great thing to continue for UKIP. You will not get your message out fairly through mainstream media. I think he hit the nail on the head perfectly, because no matter how hard we try and how good our message is, the mainstream media will never represent us perfectly or even honestly. And the other... Yeah, sorry, no, go on.
So, yeah, well, I mean, on that front, that will continue. Carl is very keen to do town hall meetings and things like that. I understand that he will be out on the 29th of June in Torquay, doing much of the same stuff for the party, campaigning and getting the message out there. I understand we've had about 30,000 leaflets printed as well on that side of things. And it's great that we're kind of mixing kind of old-fashioned campaigning where you go out there, you know, you meet people genuinely, but at the same time we're engaging with social media, we're putting it out there. And you know, what I was astounded by, because I was with Carl in Pontypridd doing my campaign in Wales, what I was astounded by was actually some of the the quality of people who just came up to us to speak. I thought they were very good, very well spoken, a lot of them. I mean, some of them screeched in some other videos, but I would say the people of Pontypridd I was very impressed by, actually. And obviously they didn't agree with us on everything, but you know, it showed that there is a hunger out there to be spoken to and to be listened to. And that authenticity, I think, well, is real. Obviously, when you're there, you feel it and you know it. But I think that authenticity also comes across through the internet. And again, that's what we need to put out there. And yes, it will continue.
Yeah, and that's been. Could I just want to get the second comment out, and then I'll let you jump in. The other one that manufactured, which is good about what you're talking about, the other parties and why they would never accept YouTubers in. And he said, look at the other parties. They have all bent the knee to PC and have tempered their speech in Parliament and subsequent policies to appease the radicals. I mean, again, spot on, absolutely right. I mean, Labour is a perfect example of this. They have essentially a radical political cult powering the entire party, keeping Jeremy Corbyn in, when so many members have tried to get rid of him. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. You can't trust what Parliament says because they're never speaking honestly.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, Labour has totally sold out the traditional kind of British working class communities that built the Labour Party originally. You know, they're not interested in that. I mean, I said this in a recent video with Carl. You know, they view many of those people now as uncouth knuckle draggers. They're happy to take their vote, but you know, they don't actually have to live with them or hang out with them at the end of the day. But and I think that's largely as well as because the Labour Party has become, you know, a professionalized party with a kind of party structure where you have, you know, you go to the right university, you join an MP's office, and then, you know, you work within the party. You don't really have a real connection to the people of the country or the people you would hope or actually do represent. So, you know, and I think that's a massive opportunity that we still have not capitalized on, but we can if we continue down the route of engaging honestly and openly and directly with the people of these communities.
Mm.
And one thing we spoke to Carl about the other day was Carl has a very modern way of campaigning. He uses things like Discord and is able to get a network of people who would probably not, you know, naturally just come forward to you otherwise. So do you think, is there any way we could sort of take a leaf out of his book and sort of build these network structures to improve our activism in UKIP, do you think?
Quite possibly. I mean, there are pitfalls to Discord, as I found out during the campaign. Of course, there was a number of smear articles used to kind of attack Carl and the Count because of kind of messaging that was put on there by, you know, people who were trolling and, you know, edgelords, so to speak. So I think it would be a bit dangerous for UKIP to have a Discord server in that regard, simply because, well, the press doesn't care, does it? It doesn't care about the truth. So, you know, they'll put out a message saying, you know, UKIP's full of these, you know, kind of, well, you can imagine the kind of messages that edgelords potentially put it. Yeah. I mean, I remember years ago, UKIP had a public forum, an official party forum, and that ended up being shut down because, I mean, people were saying the most bizarre and absurd things. I mean, this is about, I think, 10 to 15 years ago now, but I remember it very well. And, you know, it doesn't work. So, but yeah, I mean, any kind of internal structures that are kind of hidden away from prying eyes, so to speak, that could work. I mean, I'm no expert on that, but I mean, look, we're a party, we're open to embracing new technologies, new ways of doing things. So by all means.
Well, it seems like we're missing one huge thing, which only one other party has really tapped into, and I really think it can revolutionize our party. Labour Live. When are we going to have a UKIP concert in Glastonbury or something? When are we going to do that, Kris? When's it happening?
Well, you know, I mean, we had our little our rallies, didn't we, in London? So I suppose that could be the start of it. But I suppose, yeah, we need some musicians who are on side. I mean, who can we get? Was it Morrissey? Maybe, I don't know. He obviously
we can get a comedy act from John Cleese.
Right, yeah, yeah, we'll get a comedy act from John Cleese. We'll have Morrissey singing in the background. I mean, it's difficult to think. I mean, I know a number of celebrities who are totally on side, but they don't want to be known. It's very sad. You know, there's another. I can speak about this now. Not many people know this, but Rick Mail thought about joining UKIP a number of years ago,
right.
but his agent kind of won the argument. But he was very keen on joining. Of course, he's passed away now, so I suppose I could speak about this without breaking confidence. But yeah, there are a lot of people in the public eye, some of which you'd be quite surprised who have considered flirted with joining UKIP, or at the very least agree with us, practically 100% on what we're standing for.
I'm just amazed Alan Bastard might have joined the party. That's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, Could you imagine that? The PR, I don't know if it's good or bad, but everyone loved Rick May. So, no, you would be really surprised actually. But yeah, who would play there? I don't know. So we'd have Morrissey. We'd have. Who? There's a guy from a band called My Vitriol. They were kind of big in the early noughties. Som Warner.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, they were big in the noughties. Trust me on this, right?
If you say so.
And their front man is totally pro-Brexit. So I don't know. Maybe they'll play. They're pretty good. Look them up. Okay. They're pretty good. So.
I think there's something that we need. Hi guys, I'm Charlie.
Hi Charlie.
I'm the quiet one. Sometimes. So I think what would be really good is UKIP Pride.
Okay.
Right? We wanna kind of, so imagine it, yeah? There's an advert, it's a very kind of Labour household. The kid comes shamefully in to the dining room. And he's like, Mama, I've got something to tell you. She's like, what is it? Are you gay? He's like, no. I mean, UKIP. It's time to come out. And this has been a serious discussion for me and my husband, because we've got a business that deals with kids. It's based abroad, right? But still, I was like, I need to keep things separate. I've got to keep the name separate now. I've got my married name for my business stuff and my maiden name for my UKIP stuff. And then I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm behaving as if I'm in some kind of racist party. I'm behaving like a BNP member. Why? Why am I doing that, right? So, and a lot of people do this. You see, there's a lot of people who are in UKIP. They never mention it. Like
all the Conservatives for that.
Well, yeah, even the people who work for UKIP, they don't have, like, they say, I'm self-employed. There's no UKIP pride. And I think while it continues to be buried, they're winning. Right. Well, there's someone who's like, oh no, like I always start up little conversations with people in the street. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not for this. I'm definitely for that. Oh, UKIP does that kind of thing. And they're like, oh, UKIP. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's surprising amount of good stuff in their manifesto. And like just these little changes, come out, people, come out.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we talked to Sebastian Walsh quite a bit, and when he was on the stream more prominently, and that he would tell us that like he would occasionally have, like, I think one time he was approached by his current employers and told he had to remove his UKIP stuff off his Facebook because the other employees were getting a bit nervous about it, and that they were concerned it might give him issues. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think you encountered something similar, didn't you, Damien? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
Well, when I used to work as a camera assistant, I definitely experienced some hostility to my UKIP opinions.
UKIPophobia.
But I decided to chuck that in and become an electrician anyway, where no one gives a crap what you think. So brilliant.
Proper work, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Kris? Oh, is he frozen on us?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if he just wasn't finding it very funny because he's
so shocked.
Kris is not entertained.
Yeah. Oh my. Maybe he senses we're getting into dodgy territory and is just trying to get out of any possible disciplinaries.
I've got to tell you about this other idea I had, right?
Okay.
It's mad, but it's funny, and it's kind of right. Okay, so this is about the online stuff and the street stuff. Yeah, the two things, like the two pillars of UKIP. Okay. Bringing those together for a kind of mad publicity stunt that capitalizes on the fact that UKIP isn't that popular. Okay,
Okay.
so we've got the 3 pillars of UKIP actually.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And the idea is to purchase a real door in a real door frame, and somehow get it to stand up. Yeah, so it can stand up freely in the street.
I'm with you so far. Go on.
Yeah. So we're going to take this to various city centres. We're going to ask people, do you vote UKIP? They're going to say no the majority of the time. Okay. And then we'll say, okay, will you help us to train our canvassers by being as mean as possible when you open this door? So they stand behind the door. Yeah. And then our guys knock on, they say, hi, like, we're here from UKIP, right? And you can be as abusive as possible. You can slam the door, you know, whatever you want. They can post their leaflets through pointlessly, and they can just drop on the floor and fly away in the wind, you know, whatever you want. And then, like, we're going to film it all. I say we, there's nobody on board for this yet. Okay, it'll all be filmed, and then we'll also get footage of how they're getting this door from place to place, like a little documentary. Yeah, like sticking out of the back of cars, taking it onto the train, you know, just walking around, 2 guys with a door, just walking like down a country lane from one town to the next, and make a kind of a joke about it, you know. So the videos are online. It's really happening in real life. It'll definitely get media attention. And it'll be like, oh, UKIP knows that everybody hates them, you know.
So the concept is very similar to when you go to the summer fair and you get those wet sponges and you chuck them at your headmaster, basically.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in an attempt to, you know, make that headmaster seem more approachable.
Oh my. I mean, it's something to play with. When you said you grab a door, I thought it was going to be something to do with immigration, you know, like open door immigration or something. And then you're like, you know what we should do? We should get our members and we should let people abuse them. And I was like, right, okay, I want to see where you're going with this.
Well, what about if you have the door right and you say to the person, right, do you believe in leaving the European Union? Do you believe in free speech and lower immigration, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we'll step through the door. And then as soon as they step through the door, on the other side, there's a big UKIP badge. And they go, you're now a Kipper.
It's like some kind of UKIP Stargate. You know,
I must say,
instant membership.
I must say, this is not exactly going to revolutionize our membership numbers. Okay, this is not going to be viral.
We should change the logo to a milkshake.
See, that's not a bad idea. Hear me out here. That's not a bad idea. In seriousness, it's probably a bad idea. But when I was in Exeter for Sargon's rally, I met him, and he's really good with faces, but supposedly he's terrible with names. So he saw me and he goes, "I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you?" And we talked, and he recognized me eventually. And I said, "Can I get you a milkshake?" as a joke. And he goes, "Actually, if you could, that would be really, really good. That would be fantastic optics." And I was like, "Oh, you're serious? Okay, I suppose." So he's setting up and everyone's crowding him. And I walked all the way to McDonald's, which was a good 15 minutes. And I come back and I get him this chocolate milkshake. And if you notice, all of the pictures from the Exeter rally are him with a milkshake. You know, a milkshake man drinks the milkshake while talking about milkshake. And it was fantastic optics. It honed into the exact same thing that changing the badge would, which is we understand that we're getting abused, but we're cool with it. It's a bit like taking away the insult from somebody. We don't care that we get milkshake, what we do, but we play it off as a joke. You know what I mean? And I think that worked very well for Carl. Now, I wouldn't seriously suggest changing the logo. However, we always like to do something fun with the Young Independents merchandise. Last year we had the Nigel Farage condoms, which sold out like in a day and a half.
That was you guys.
Well, it was somebody in particular who masterminded it and produced them, but we'll keep that a secret.
I didn't know it was you guys.
yeah, those did very well. And the reason they did well, that's another story. But very quickly, because it's a great story. I was at the stall and we're selling them and they weren't doing very well. And I see Michael Crick, this little plump gentleman, walk past me and I go, "Crick, you look like a man who could do with one of these." And he goes, "Right." And he sort of scurries over like, "Oh, what's he going to sell me? A UKIP pen or a UKIP rosette or something?" And I go, "These top quality Nigel Johnnies. How many can I get you? 10 or 20? And he starts laughing and taking photos. He puts it on his Twitter. All the other journos, like within half an hour, come over and start buying them. People who've seen them on Twitter start buying them. And it does fantastically well. So what I'm thinking is this year when we do our merchandise, we should have some YI badges with just a nice, you know, yellow and purple milkshake. Who knows?
That'd be good.
What do you think, Chris?
Was it? So, sorry, I was lost you just there. I think they're working on some internet connect cables outside or some such. But anyway, what was that? So I heard about milkshakes and rosettes or something.
Somebody made a joke that we should change the logo to a milkshake as sort of a stunt, and I was talking about how Sargon used the fact that he'd been milkshaked as a joke. So when he was being asked about being milkshaked, he was drinking a milkshake himself, which played off very well. Then we got on to talking about the merchandise that we were selling at the last conference. And as I'm sure you'll be aware, the Nigel Farage Johnnies sold incredibly well. We like to have some sort of, I assume you've heard about those?
Well, yes. Well, I was there. I was very well aware, and I was aware of some of the complaints as well. But I won't repeat them.
It wasn't everyone's cup of tea.
No, well, I guess not. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an interesting stunt, and yeah, well, let's use it. I mean, let's use the milkshake iconography. You know, it doesn't bother us. You know, quite frankly, bring it on. I mean, I just find it so. To be honest, though, I was very disappointed at the response by the police and the security services and the media. Quite frankly, who made such light work of it when obviously it happened to Mr. Corbyn and a few others, and then suddenly it became a criminal offence. It's just the kind of the hypocrisy of it all and the general inability to treat people equally under the law. You know, it's perfectly fine. It's fine when it's a Kipper getting milkshake, but anyone else. And then of course that goes all into the Joe Brand thing, of course. But
and Corbyn's attacker, if you will, whose assaulter, I guess is the proper term, got a month in jail. Nigel Farage's milkshaker got 150 hours of community service and a fine of 350. And the guy that milkshaked Sargon in Exeter was just asked to leave the small area for 48 hours, and nothing ever came of it.
I think. Well, I heard he's now got a BBC Three comedy special now, actually. So
please tell me this is a joke.
But yeah, I hope so. I don't know, but you never know, do you? I mean, these people. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Carl is obviously part of what he does. He does comedy, and even more explicitly, the Count does as well. And that reminds me that I think it was BBC Three who recorded a few stand-up specials with him. And then as soon as people found out, he's going to be on TV, then somebody somewhere complained to the BBC. And of course, the BBC cancelled the entire thing. I mean, this is a man who had, his entire ability to make money removed from him. Thankfully, somebody at the BBC thought, well, this guy's got a bit of talent. He's quite funny. Maybe we should put him on TV and, pay him money for that, keep him going. And then that was all cancelled. But yeah, it's the hypocrisy that really grinds my gears in all of this. And again, it proves once again that they really are after us. We're not paranoid.
Well, I remember watching the Daily Politics, and there was a woman on there, I think she was a journalist, who said, I understand with Tommy Robinson getting milkshaked, I understand that to be satire, but in the other circumstances, it's obviously not okay. But Tommy Robinson, that's satire, so it is okay.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And and the Joe Brand situation. What she said on that program, the BBC's line was, well, I mean, people say controversial things on the show, and it's all jokes anyway. I was going, well, hang on a minute. You were attacking Carl Benjamin for making a joke. And now suddenly when Joe Brand does it, well, that's perfectly fine. But it's also that's interesting, the total inconsistency of their position, because of course they insta-sacked, was it Danny Baker, wasn't it, for what he tweeted about the royal baby, so to speak. So there's even an inconsistency on that side of things. But then again, you're dealing with the BBC, and we all know who they've defended for many years, don't we? So
reminds me of the famous quote. I can't remember who said this, and obviously it's satirical. But a man stands up and he goes, "They may have standards, but we have double standards."
Yes. Yeah. Well, that is the BBC all over, isn't it? Quite frankly, and. It's real. I mean, obviously, working in my job, I come into contact with journalists, producers, editors, etc. And for the most part, a lot of them are perfectly fine professionals. But I mean, some organisations, I mean, BuzzFeed, for example, you know, you are dealing with somebody who palpably hates you and views you as somebody, well, no, as something no longer human. I mean, Carl uses this term that they're ideologically possessed, you know, and that kind of colors their view of you. And it is true that is the case. I mean, my experience, particularly, BuzzFeed really are the worst, next to The Independent for us.
Sorry, keep going, because I want to jump in on that, but I feel you have another point to make.
Sure. I mean, they really are the worst. I mean, every time the phone would ring and it'd be a BuzzFeed journalist, I wouldn't be thinking, oh, I wonder what they want to know about what UKIP's doing. It'd be like, oh, right, what hit piece are you writing right now? And it shouldn't be like that. I mean, I'm not asking for positive coverage from BuzzFeed, but, you know, maybe write a neutral article once in a while. But it never happens. And the next worst on that front actually is The Independent. I mean, the Guardian gets a lot of stick from us, but actually, I would say that they still, to a certain degree, perform legitimate journalism. They're journalists. They are journalists. They're opposed to us, but they behave like journalists. But The Independent is absolutely disgraceful, and then BuzzFeed, well, it's not really journalism at all, is it? Quite frankly. But, yeah.
Have you ever dealt with?
Sorry,
no, I've talked too much. Damien, go ahead.
Oh no! All I was going to ask is, and what about the outlets who were traditionally thought of as more right wing? So, say the Sun, the Daily Mail, and also maybe the Spectator. How do they generally treat you?
And the Tory Graph.
Right, yeah, the Tory Graph. Well, the clue's in the name there, really. I mean, in the past, these papers, particularly the Express, were a lot friendlier to us. But of course, they got sold off. They're now owned by Reach PLC, formerly Trinity Mirror. So one of the things that the Express were doing online, which I discovered, was that every time they wrote a positive story about a UKIP MEP, they removed the word UKIP from all the headlines. Now, what that does online is if you don't have the word UKIP in a headline, that means if you search for UKIP, you won't find that news article, or at least it won't be at the top of the pile. So they replaced that to British MEP every time. And there was clearly an editorial decision made to limit the use of the phrase UK Independence Party and UKIP so that people basically wouldn't pick it up. But what happened was, of course, is that they got bought out by Trinity, now known as Reach PLC, who, of course, Labour Party aligned. And they're in a strange kind of position whereby their editorial line is they want to be kind of pro-Remain, and they're certainly, you know, having influence from the Labour Party, but at the same time, they've still got to sell newspapers to the base that actually reads the Daily Express. But I mean, they've become increasingly less supportive of us. They've become increasingly supportive of Brexit Party and Farage, but they know, but they want to support him full frontal now because they know that damages the Conservative Party. So, you know, these types of things kind of are quite complex, and they weave their ways around. So no, I mean, the Express is for the most part lost to us. I mean, the Daily Mail, I mean, the hit pieces about Gerard, I mean, there's a few, it's mostly done by freelancers. There was a couple of freelancers. I know the freelancer when he calls me that, oh, right, here's another hit piece. There was this one massive hit piece that the Daily Mail did on Gerard, where they actually sent a journalist all the way to the Philippines to track down his wife's family, because Gerard's wife is Filipino. He went out, and I understand that they don't live in a city. They live like way out there, you know, in the Filipino countryside. They sent this guy out there, and he just turns up. You know, these are people who have never seen, you know, a national journalist in their life. They didn't really understand what this guy wanted, but he turns up, you know, asking questions about Gerard, his private life, etc., etc. I mean, it's really the lowest of the low, and yeah. And so, you know, the Daily Mail, I mean, they are ultimately aligned to the Tories, and, you know, they will do their dirty work effectively. So, you know, I've always viewed the role of head of communication for UKIP as probably the most difficult comms job in modern British politics, simply because, you know, we don't really have any particular paper or outlet on our side, you know.
Apart from Kipper Central.
And that's why it's increasingly, yes, indeed, quite. Yeah, well, good, yeah, absolutely, and which is fantastic, which is why we need to have these things grow, and same with what you guys are doing right now, you know, with the Kipper stream. The more you do this, the more it will grow, the more influential. I mean, we've had some support, was it, from political lights in the past, you know, and there's opportunities there, but I mean, anything that really now has any kind of corporation or major organization behind it is opposed to us, because, you know, quite frankly, when the Express supported us, that was when, well, firstly, it was owned by people who were Eurosceptics, but secondly, they viewed UKIP as something which was nothing more really than a pressure group on the Tory party. And now they think, well, that job has effectively either been done, or it's kind of it's been shifted over to the Brexit party. And I mean, going on from that, I think that's one of the fundamental problems we've had in UKIP, is that we've had a myopic vision of the party, in that, you know, there were many supporters who fundamentally were Tories, but just viewed it as a means to influence the Tory party. And I think UKIP is capable of so much more than that. It plays a much wider role for that. But yeah, I mean, we don't have any papers on our side, so we can forget getting really truly positive coverage. We can hope for neutral coverage, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. So that's why we need to, you know, keep on building the social media and influential, and, you know, bring in social media influencers. Well, and sorry, go on.
I was going to say the newspaper business is dying rapidly anyway, so surely, you know, it's not too much to worry about.
Well, it's complex, really, because obviously the older generation still read newspapers. They still believe newspapers. I mean, if you looked at the last campaign, where effectively, you know, the Telegraph, the Express, and to an extent the Daily Mail all endorsed the Brexit party, and it did have a big effect on that. So, but you make an interesting point as well. I mean, all these newspapers are failing. Effectively, their readerships are dropping like a stone every single year. So if you're in business, you're a capitalist, you want to make money, it doesn't make any sense actually to own a newspaper anymore. So the only reason that you would own a newspaper is to disseminate propaganda. Yeah. So I mean, in the UK right now, I mean, the most explicit example of this, of course, is the Evening Standard. So if you walk around London, you're going to work or you're coming back, you know, there is around every single corner, there's somebody trying to force a copy of the Evening Standard into your hand. I mean, you know, it's nice having plenty of supplies for the cat litter tray, but, you know, I just think in my head, well, you know, oh, right, so what does George Osborne want me to think now? You know, what do his bosses want me to think? And yeah, it's all like that. But the other side of it, even though readership is down, of course, because of what Google does with Google News and various other facilities online, those newspaper articles are, you know, they're on the internet now. You see them everywhere. And even if you don't read the full paper, there are still many people who just read the headline. And that's what their take will be. And that's always the danger. It's what happened with Carl. You know, these things are entirely shewn of context. And people believe, you know, 3 or 4 bad headlines, and that's who you are, effectively, to so many people. So yes, their readership is going down, and you could argue their reach is going down, but they're still very powerful, and they've digitalized to disseminate their propaganda.
Okay, if anyone wants to send in any questions, by the way, now is the time to do it. One thing I have to ask you about, because I've heard quite a few questions about this, is, do you have any leadership ambitions within UKIP whatsoever? Yeah, so if you want to address that.
Well, I feel very humble about this, because there's been actually so many people who've come to me, they've sent me messages, they've come up, people I've never even met before, saying, you know, would you consider standing in the upcoming leadership election? And, you know, I'm really flattered by all of this. I mean, look, let's wait and see what happens. I mean, I hate to leave it on hanging on there, but you know, let's wait and see what happens. Let's see, you know, who the final runners and riders are. I mean, what I will say about this leadership election is that I hope whoever wins this leadership election understands UKIP's unique role in British politics, and that is as the party which stands for independence of thought, telling truth to power, and simply being honest and talking about the things that no other political party will even touch or talk about. That's the role we play in British politics. And it's an important role. And again, like I say, I hope that they are bold and they're brave and fight for the kind of values that I'm sure you all want to support in this country as well. So
yeah, well said, well said.
And is there anybody that has either hinted or said that they were going to be running or are going to be running that you like the sound of at the moment?
Well, I'm afraid as an employee of the party, I couldn't possibly comment on any of the
Nearly had
particular
you.
candidates.
Nearly.
But, you know, I mean, anyone, I think, who is committed to UKIP and wants to put their head above the parapet and stand for the party, I think that's admirable in itself, because, you know, standing for this party, you will have the media go after you. They will dig into your past. They will dig into your present and possibly even your future to find anything in order to kick the party. So I have deep respect for anyone who chooses to run for leadership of this party, wherever they come from. And I hope we have, you know, a solid leadership election. And once we make that decision, whoever that may be, the party comes together and we can start planning then for what I'm sure will be a very successful conference in Newport, Wales in September.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to ask, sticking on the topic of leadership and that. Obviously, the party, when Gerard took over, was more or less, it was very close to death. It was on its way out. Yeah. And when he took over, he very much reinvigorated the party. I think it was tripled or close to it, his the membership of.
Well, we actually went from 17,000 to over 30,000. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah,
so that's okay, about half then. But yeah, and he gave so much life and brought so much fresh blood into the party, and as we've seen with YouTube. And I imagine you spent a lot of time with Gerard. Now, obviously, he's absolutely well deserved his break and is currently relaxing at the time. And I was just curious, maybe from an inside track, what do you think the likelihood is that he might run again, or does he? Or is he quite happy to just retire at this point?
As I said before, I refer you to my prior answer. Let's wait and see who the runners and riders are. I'm afraid I can't give you any definitive answers on that question, but
that's fair.
But there we are. And again, I mean, I wouldn't be able to comment, you know, as an employee of the party, and I wouldn't be able to break any any confidences that I may have. So let's wait and see. Hold tight. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting, and quite frankly, I'm going to look forward to it, because right now the media is totally obsessed with the Tory leadership election. And by the way, isn't it great that Rory Stewart has been kicked out? I think that's fantastic. Yeah. Get him out. But I think once we announce some of our candidates, the media then will start taking a look at us and to see who the people are and what the future of UKIP could be under their potential leaderships. You know.
Yeah.
Michael, do we have any more questions on the YouTube?
I will quickly check if you give me a moment. But most of them
might have to go in a sec. Just a heads up.
Okay,
yeah, so most of them have just been off the cuff comments. So I'll quickly ask the chat now. For those that are watching, if you have any quick, short questions you want to ask Kris or the stream, please do put them in. I think that we'll probably go on for maybe another 10 or so minutes. I think, Damo.
Well, I think probably 5 minutes. 10
5 minutes. Okay, yeah. So better get your questions in real quick then.
Can I ask this? Well, Damien,
no, go ahead, Sebastian. Go ahead.
If you don't mind me asking, what did you do before you were in politics? Because you were, before your current position, you were the press officer or head of press for the Welsh Assembly. Before you were in a political job, what did you do? It must have been some sort of press.
Yes, well, I was head of marketing and communications for a telecoms company based in Swansea in Wales. Before that, then I worked for a company called Statista in Hamburg, Germany. Statistical output specialized in US market statistics, emerging currencies, things like that. Before that, I worked for IBM in Slovakia. That was my first job out of.
So quite the European.
I suppose so. Yes, quite. No, it was interesting. I completed my master's in politics, and I just wanted to have the experience of living abroad and working somewhere. And at the time, a friend of mine had a Slovak girlfriend, and she said, "Oh, well, there's this Slovak job site, and they're very keen on native English speakers for certain types of roles." So I took up a content editor and content writer role with IBM. For a rather interesting project. Our main client was Samsung, and yeah, it was a great time. And I mean, I love Slovakia, and then I was given the opportunity to work in Germany, where I always wanted to to live for a few years, and you know, it was a great experience. I mean, I recommend living and working in a country, another country, wherever it may be. I think it's a real, you know, it's a mind-opening experience, and looks great on a CV, I think, as well. You know,
and you must speak some pretty good German and Slovak then.
My Slovak is atrocious. My German is okay, but it would have been better had the people not insisted on speaking English to me all the time. And I suspect this is a common problem with native English speakers, in that, you know, you want to speak the native lingo, but everyone wants to show you how brilliantly they speak English. But yeah, no, Slovak is very Slavic languages. I mean, it's very difficult. German is very easy because, of course, English is based on the same kind of root anyway. But I mean, it's pronunciation is the big problem for me with Slavic languages. I mean, you know, it's another case of people doing things with their tongues that I never grew up with. So well, I think I'll leave it there anyway.
Slovakia is a country where you don't really hear too much about in general. So what is the culture like there, and what are the people like?
Well, it's absolutely fantastic in Slovakia. Obviously, as a former communist country, it was united with Czechoslovakia until 1993. The people there are very aware of the kind of issues we now face in terms of social engineering from the far left, the shutdown of the media, because, of course, they lived under communism, and they see, you know, and this is same, you know, some of the most anti-authoritarian, I suppose, people in this country right now actually come from Eastern Europe. I mean, the Poles, you know, they are
Hungarians,
Bulgarians, you know, they are distinctly aware and skeptical and suspicious of the activities and the behaviors of the state. And that makes them, you know, effectively very libertarian in their background. But in Slovakia, yeah, it was absolutely the same there. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, very welcoming people. They know a bit about Britain, but it's always fascinating to them. And the other thing you notice in countries like that is the way they deal with money. So when you pay with paper money, for example, in Slovakia, every time it could be a brand new, fresh note, and the cashier will pick it up, and then they'll look up, and then, you know, because these are societies that, you know, had their currency collapse, or it wasn't effectively worth anything for so long. So there's that healthy skepticism, which I think now we miss in Britain. I think there's too many people who just trust blindly that, you know, the state is necessarily for their own good and always behaves in their interest. But no, Slovakia is a wonderful country, welcoming, warm, brilliant people, fantastic, and a very good government now who's liberalised their economy. They also have a flat tax of 19%, and yeah, great growing
on
economy.
all income.
On all income, totally flat, 19% flat tax. It was 18% when I went there, went up by 1%, but no, really good and great for investment as well.
Food for thought.
Great.
Cool.
I actually have found.
Some... Oh, sorry,
no, you go ahead, Michael. You go ahead.
Yeah, I've got some questions now to ask, Chris. We'll try and do them as short fire round ones.
Right.
So the first one from King Europe 1 asks, is it time to ditch the logo and go with something more akin to the Kipper Stream logo? So the more refreshed purple and white one that we have.
I very much like the purple and white. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Cadbury's Dairy Milk.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah. That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, I quite like that. I mean, why wouldn't you want your logo to evoke delicious chocolate? So yeah, let's take a look at that and give it a go. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the same argument was made about Lenny the Lion, in that you want it to look like the Premier League, and then the Premier League weren't very happy with that association. So who knows what would happen with Cadbury's?
Yes, well, yeah, we had to put Lenny the Lion down, I'm afraid. I mean, yeah, it's, I don't know. I mean, the look on Lenny's face, I couldn't quite understand it. I mean, was it shock or was it confusion? I mean, if you look closely at that, it's almost like a Mona Lisa smile, isn't it? You can't quite tell what the intent is behind the look. So, well, can I tell you that story? I remember when I was at Neil Hamilton's Manor in Wiltshire, and Steve Crowther came over to show us the 2 designs that were going to be shown in September at the party conference, and it was Lenny the Lion and this Very strange. I can't remember what it was, like a sail design, like 3 different sails. And, well, you know, Steve Crowther apparently thought that the sails were going to win. And of course, we went to the party conference, and then obviously we had these 2 options with the boxes. And clearly the box with Lenny the Lion in had been used many, many times. It was always obviously ripped apart. But I mean, the disappointing thing was that, I mean, so many of the membership, they wanted the option of, you know, keeping the old logo, because I mean, what really was wrong with it, so to speak? I mean, the pound stands for sovereignty. I mean, you could argue that the design of the logo possibly is a little bit outdated in terms of the way it's styled, but I think we've got to keep consistency in some way. So I mean, what you've created there, I think it's a very good start. But yeah, I've never really liked the yellow. It's too strong. It's too, it's
Yellow.
yeah, it's too yellow. Yeah, quite. So no, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, let's see. I mean, have you put it forward yet to any design groups, or is this? Obviously, you've showed it to me, and I think it's very good. But
well, Charlie, who's funnily enough just disappeared. She has a little design team, and they've been trying to push forward different designs. But yeah, we're working on it.
Okay, right.
But we don't want to frighten the older members too much just yet. We want to ease them into it, and then before they know it, it's there. They can't do anything about it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, that reminds me of another story. When I was head of comms in Wales, we had so many people emailing in with these designs for a purple dragon, and
Wow.
It was just, to be honest, I mean, some of the designs we received, they weren't professional graphics designers. Let's put it that way. I mean, to be honest, it looked more like Barney the dinosaur.
Were they using Windows Paint by any chance?
I'm sure a few of them were.
Or crayons.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's just an idea, just an idea. And it's like, yeah, I don't think we'll take this on board, but thank you very much for your interest.
I found a YouTube question here, and I've got to read his name as well because he has a fantastic name. This is from Valeristario, and his question is, do you feel we need someone who embraces the anti-political correct sentiment prevalent now?
Don't we already? I mean, yes, I agree, but I mean, I think surely we do already. We need more of those voices, and I think we need to tie that up then with a kind of a consistent strategy, because right now there's a lot of good people here, there, and everywhere. I mean, you two guys, obviously, you're doing this Kipper stream stuff, but I think there's an opportunity now to kind of further organize it. So we've got a consistent plan of operations going forward that utilizes you guys and other volunteers and that going forward. So and obviously, I mean, there's an opportunity for people already in the party who might not be so well known to kind of build themselves up as the anti-PC voice of the party as well. So yeah, absolutely. And that's what, again, I go back to this is what UKIP should be about. This is the role it plays, the unique role it plays in British politics, and we have to expand and continue down that road. Absolutely.
That's cool. I've got a good one here, which is actually resonates with me quite a lot, which is from, I'm just calling you Kubans because I don't know how to pronounce your first part. What will you do if the next leader backtracks on the fight against political correctness and possibly condemns the YouTubers in the UK?
Well, I'm obviously loyal. I believe in UKIP and so forth. Although I would find it very difficult if UKIP went down a totally PC route, because then I would wonder, well, what exactly is the point of UKIP in and of itself? If it just becomes another party like the Tories, the Lib Dems, and Labour, then I'm afraid I think it will just simply sink, won't it? So we've got limited resources, but we know what creates stories. We know what gains attention, sometimes for good or ill. But I suspect, I mean, if a leader would drastically come in and choose to do that, I mean, quite frankly, I think it would be massively damaging to what we have already kind of achieved within the party. And it'd be difficult for me to see really a future for the party. Again, like I said, the fundamental point of UKIP is to tell truth to power, is to be bold and brave, and to be different to all the others. That's what we do. That's our unique selling point, really. And if you lose that, then I'm afraid I think the party will probably be doomed to total insignificance, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think I'll make this the last one because I think this sums up everything that's going on at the moment. And it's from Matthew Hatch again, and he says, "Do you believe we'll leave the EU on the 31st of October? And do you think UKIP, or do you believe that UKIP is still preparing for such an eventuality if we do or don't?"
Okay, October the 31st. Effectively, you're going to be asking me whether or not I trust Boris Johnson to do the job or not.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think out of all those candidates, he's probably the best option, other than Raab, who of course was kicked out. But of who is left, he is, I would say, probably the best option. Will he do it? I hope so. You know, quite frankly, I hope so. And I think whether or not he really is committed to leaving the European Union or wants to, I think he must surely realise that if the Tories don't deliver Brexit, then they're practically finished as a party. And even if you're a staunch Tory Remainer, look, you know, in the hierarchy of needs, if you're a politician, you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, okay, well, I want Britain to leave, but I might actually lose my political career. Well, surely even those guys are going to come around, and girls are going to come around and say, well, we're going to have to back him just to save the party. So it may be one of the few times in history, certainly in recent times, where the interests of the Tory party might actually be aligned with the interests of the country.
Do you think they'll be able to get it through Parliament, though?
Again, it's difficult to see and predict that future. I mean, we'd have to take a closer look at the numbers, and it's difficult to predict before this leadership election is over. I mean, I think Boris can command more support than May ever got, and that's, I think, is not necessarily just down to his position on Brexit, but more to do with the fact that, you know, he can bring people around. I mean, he's got far more support, it seems, than people were actually predicting initially. And I mean, do they really want a general election? Does Labour really want a general election? I mean, they're looking at, you know, they're looking at the Brexit party as well. It's not just them. And, you know, if they want to get this done, they're going to have to get this done by the end of October. I think Boris Johnson is their best chance of doing that. But I mean, if we've got any more time, I would like to expand on that and the way that Farage and the Brexit party and those guys have been commenting on this.
Oh, please do, yeah.
I'm going to have to dart off, but I'm really sorry, but absolute pleasure. I will be watching this back, so I will get your answer, and hope to have you on again sometime soon.
That's great. Thanks, Seb. Pleasure. Cheers.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
But if I could finish on the way that the Brexit Party has dealt with this leadership election, I mean, I found it very interesting that Nigel Farage effectively almost endorsed Rory Stewart for leadership of the Conservative Party, which is really quite astounding considering, you know, this guy's an arch Remainer. He campaigned heavily to remain in the European Union. He effectively had no credibility to become leader and lead the Tories lead the country out of the European Union. So, you know, being suspicious of these kinds of things, I would suspect that probably Mr. Farage would have preferred Mr. Stewart because he is the least likely to take the party out. I mean, I found it hilarious. I saw Isabel Oakeshott tweet about Rory Stewart about 2 weeks ago. It was quite a very strange tweet saying how, oh, what an underdog, you know, how wonderful, committed to, you know, people's politics Rory Stewart is. And it's like, well, hang about, you know, I mean, this guy's been an enemy of Brexit since practically when it, you know, since day one, pretty much. And now you think he's the, you know, the greatest thing going. It's an utter nonsense, really. So that's made me very skeptical of them. I mean, Farage knows he's got a very tight window to get a general election and obviously try and get into number 10. So he's been pushing out. Rory Stewart's gone now. And now, of course, today he said, well, you know, he's happy to make a pact with Boris. But, you know, I don't think Boris is particularly interested. And I think the meeting that they had in Boisdale last year is a very long time ago indeed. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think once Boris is in there, we can then take a look at what how the numbers drop, and then we'll go from there, really. So, yeah.
How do you think Farage is going to be able to hold on to these swing voters and stop them going back to the Tories?
Well, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. I mean, on one sense, I mean, a lot of them didn't really leave the Tories, did they? I mean, a lot of them are still, for example, people who are involved in this party, they're still Tory party members. And of course, because the Brexit Party doesn't have a membership, therefore they're not actually breaking Conservative Party rules by being a member of another party. Of course, you've got the same old first past the post effect in place as well. You know, there's going to be a lot of people who, while the Brexit Party are doing well in the polls, they'll ask themselves, do I really want to take a risk and possibly let Labour in if I don't back the Tories in my constituency, or vice versa? So I think you'll find that very difficult. I mean, what he's been good at is getting, for example, people like Anne Widdecombe, these kind of stalwart, kind of, you know, doyens of British Toryism, which kind of sends the message, it's okay, yeah, we can support them. That's fine, that's all well and good. But beyond that, I think he's going to find it very, very difficult, unless, of course, the Tories fail to get us out on October the 31st. But and it's such a hodgepodge of people. I mean, you know, Claire Fox and former Trotskyites. I mean, you know, in line with in league with somebody like Anne Widdecombe, who's committed Catholic and believes in certain things like gay cures. And the other thing as well, of course, is if you're going to run a general election, you need some kind of manifesto beyond, you know, just deliver Brexit. Surely, I mean, how are you going to respond to the media? I mean, they've made noises that they're going to produce some kind of manifesto, but it's still, nothing has really come out. And, you know, it's smart. What he's done is very smart. He knows that by not putting out particular policies, you know, he's not going to turn off some people, because when you create a policy, when you put something out there, of course, you're going to get people who come along with you, and others, they're not going to be very supportive of this. But it's this kind of this hyper populism that we've never really even seen before, you know, just pure absolute populism on Brexit. But how that actually applies to a general election context, it's never really been tried before, and I'm very skeptical it would be truly successful, quite frankly. But and then that opens up, you know, potentially the future for UKIP. So obviously, if we leave the European Union, the Brexit pie is finished. But the important thing is that we have UKIP in place to then pick up, firstly, those people who back the Brexit Party for those things, but again, to be once again the voice of, you know, dissent, effectively, against the political establishment.
Well, one thing which just came to me, actually, when we were on our stream with Carl, he seemed to think that taking away Labour votes was prime territory for us, and that we should be rolling the tanks on their land, so to speak, especially in places like the north. What do you think of that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's the other side of it. And of course, in UKIP, we've always been a party that's taken from, you know, the Tories and Labour. I mean, if this government takes us out of the European Union, of course, I think a lot of people will probably, you know, who came to us before will probably stick with the Tories then, because they'll feel like, well, the one issue that they disagreed with them for is, you know, sorted. So they're broadly in agreement with the Tories. But yes, absolutely. It's the Labour voters and those kind of Labour heartlands, the forgotten areas of this country, working class areas where, you know, industry has been ripped from them, you know, prospect economic. It's like this in South Wales, it's like this in, you know, Yorkshire, various other parts of the north and the Midlands. That's very fertile territory, potentially, because again, the Labour Party isn't interested in what goes on there. It's become increasingly metropolitan. They're not really in touch with kinds of people there. I mean, recently they announced that the Labour Party is totally committed to social justice issues. So, you know, it's got rid of its kind of traditional associations with true working class politics, kind of, and you know, it's become so PC that it's made it totally incapable of standing up for, you know, indigenous working people in the country. You know, if you bring up the idea that mass uncontrolled immigration actually drives wages lower, particularly at the bottom scale in working class communities, you're accused of being a racist or you know, misapplying the very real stats for some kind of nefarious gain. So yeah, it's really now impossible for them. The biggest opponents for us really in that regard is what we always call, you know, effectively, and I don't like the term, but it is the general term, the donkey vote. You know, the people who say, well, my father voted for Labour, my grandparents vote for Labour, so I'm voting for Labour. And then you say, well, yeah, but, you know, they stand for X, Y, Z. Do you agree with that? And they say no. Okay, well, why are you voting for Labour? And they're like, well, always vote for Labour. You know, and that's the real danger, just the unthinking tribal politics, and unless we can break through that, it's going to be very difficult indeed. But there is hope. And there is hope obviously through social media. We've seen the polling on 18 to 25-year-olds, second most popular party among 18 to 25-year-olds during a poll in April, which again, represents a massive shift from where we were many years ago, where people in their 60s, 70s, 80s were our most popular demographic. So you could argue our current direction could prove to be very important and provide a very successful future. But that's the long game, and politics is always a long game. So in the short term, I don't see us really picking up much from that, in the next year or two. But 5-10 years down the line, I think UKIP potentially, if we can hold it together and be consistent, could be a decent, good political force in this country going forward.
Great. I think that's a good note to wrap this up. Did you want to remind us when that next conference is again?
Right, the next party, you have to remind me myself, actually. Sorry about
No
this.
worries.
But yeah, sorry. Well,
I should have it myself, really, as the host of the Kipper stream.
Sorry, yeah. So yeah, I just want to check. Yeah, so it's the national conference then will be from the 20th to the 21st of September 2019. It's going to be at the Newport ICC, International Convention Centre. It is a brand new convention centre venue. I believe we are either the first or one of the first events to ever be held there. So it's all going to be all brand spanking new, and I'm sure it will give the right kind of message both to the membership and the media that you're seeing a refreshed UKIP, and hopefully, as I said, we'll have a leader who understands the unique role of UKIP in British politics and can take us forward beyond Brexit.
Great. I'm sure we'll have some great speakers there as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I understand that's being worked on already. And yeah, there'll be some people from social media and other outlets that some people may have not thought would have turned up, I understand. So there's one or two there. So yeah, watch this space. And yeah, I mean, let's be positive. I mean, it's again, as I've said, we've got to identify that we have a unique role in politics. That's what we do. We're a party. We're a consistent party. We have core beliefs. The future is ours, potentially. We just have to hold this together over the next few months and over the summer. And let's move forward from there.
The future is purple.
Absolutely. Purple, like Barney the dinosaur.
Fantastic. All right. Well, great to have you on, Kris, and interesting to hear your side of what's going on in UKIP and the future of Brexit. Yeah, so goodbye.
Thanks, Damien. Bye, Damien.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.